let's just delve right into it. You talk about financial inclusion and how business can contribute to the MDGs. What role do you see the banking sector in particular playing in coming closer to meeting those MDGs?
Good evening, Anna. Thanks very much. I read my paper today and shared that a good understanding by the banking sector of the low income and poor market in South Africa would help us to offer services that will really be not only accessed but used by poor and low income people, and in that way the banking sector can play a massive role.
What is that role? I wanted to get a little bit into the role that you and how it can meet those MDGs.
Well, access to financial services quite often is not directly linked to the MDGs, and you have to link it through income generation and then empowerment of the poor to really address some of the challenges they have in terms of health and education, etc. So access to financial services means that you have ability to increase your income, and it's a very simple thing. I mean, if you think about people that now have the ability to send money, to transact on a daily basis using a bank account, to access financial services far more conveniently and less costly to them. Those are the kind of things we are chatting about.
Let's talk a little bit about sending that money. I mean, you were telling me before that research is showing that remittances in and out of Africa are now outweighing foreign aid onto the continent, and that is quite significant. Talk to us about that and how that's changing the landscape on the continent.
Well, I think what happened over the past few years is that the remittances from outside the continent to the continent helped for a lot of survival of people, but also for investment in businesses, for expanding economic horizons. I specifically noted a while ago that a report said in 2005 that just from South Africa to our neighbors there's a send of about 6 billion rand per year, and just a recent report in 2011 upped that to 9 billion a year. And you can think about the positive impact the flow of money into the neighboring areas must have for our counterparts and our citizens over there.
Let's talk about the M-Pesa model in Kenya. That has been praised, and this is a model that has worked so well for the particular target of people that you're speaking about. And you were saying that it's been difficult to replicate a model like that here in South Africa and in a country like South Africa. Why is that? Well,
I often say the M-Pesa model has a halo effect because it's so successful. And most people then expect that wherever you bring the same model, it should have the same success. But what is important to note is that in Kenya, the company that provides the mobile phone service there, Safaricom, already had 80% market share. So a lot of people were already provided the service, the mobile service by this company. So that was like a captive market. Also, in Kenya, the financial services institutions and their outreach is concentrated in the main areas, mostly around Nairobi, which means there is a heavy requirement for remittance services, which in the past was with informal send and receive at a high cost. And M-Pesa empowered people to send and receive money at far more conveniently, far more securely. Now, if you come to South Africa, you will find that there's a far bigger reach of financial services, formal points nearer to people. We already had the Financial Services Charter that indicated in 2008 that 76% of the people in the country are within a few kilometers of financial service points. Also, there is far higher competition with different service providers here, and therefore I don't think M-Pesa in the same kind of model than in Kenya would be have a high growth here, but I think that mobile remittance services in general would be conducive for South Africa, and we've seen that with some examples in the market. For example, cash sent by Absa that sends about 70 million per month.
Let's talk a little bit about these mobile services, because that is something that you spoke about and you were talking about. It's really important for the banking sector to really zone in on what those key drivers of making these services available to people. What kinds of developments are you seeing in this space? You've mentioned something that Absa is doing right now, but as a whole, the banking sector as a whole, how much discussion and how much action is being taken to be able to capitalize on this opportunity?
Yeah, we've seen over the last few years a very keen interest by all the financial institutions to serve the lower end of the market, and I think the biggest contribution we can expect from the so-called branchless banking area, which basically means that you are servicing people outside the traditional or conventional branch infrastructure. And this has to do with mobile phone services, with working through partners that then reach the client. And basically the most important thing here is to reduce the cost to the client to interact with the bank, and at the same time reduce the cost to serve the client. I predict that we're going to see far-reaching growth in this area, improvement of services, technological innovations coming to the fore, and all the banks are really playing a role in driving this.
Professor, I want to speak a little bit about the deadline, because I mean, what had been put in place is that the hope was that we would meet the MDGs by 2015. We have seen some very key people from the African continent, leaders, saying that for the African continent, it's utterly impossible for us to be able to meet those MDGs. Just give us your view, and particularly looking at what the banking sector is doing right now, because you've said that obviously that service is really important to be able to elevate people and eradicate poverty. But just talk to us a little bit about what you think is happening in that space, and when we could see, you know, the eradication of poverty.
Well, I think the eradication of poverty is a very strong statement, and I think we are looking at a reduction of poverty as much as possible. Last year in 2011 we had a report by the UN to report on the progress with reaching the Millennium Development Goals, and already there we saw overall globally we saw quite good progress. But if you break it down, then you'll see most of the progress are from China and India, and Africa is lagging behind in terms of that progress. We therefore do not think that Africa will reach the Millennium Development Goal targets in 2015. It will take a bit longer. But another way of looking at this is to look at financial inclusion, for example, in South Africa. South Africa, we already reached 63%, according to Finmark Trust, of the population with banking services. And the whole idea is to really sort of further the impact of having access to financial services, is to make sure that you have both impact and use of these services. And I think in that way, in South Africa, through access to financial services, one would see a good outcome by 2015.
Professor, I want to ask you a little bit about the role of women, because one of the goals is gender empowerment, and Nielsen had done a report on the African continent, and one of the things that they had found in their marketing survey is that a lot of women are involved in business on the African continent, a lot of women that are buying products in terms of, and also running businesses, and also delivering. When it comes to businesses that are run by deliveries, they're the ones that are delivering products to fellow women in businesses. And what I would like to know, though, is when it comes to targeting women in the banking sector, is that something that you are exploring, a company like Absa is exploring? Is it something that you're hearing your colleagues in the banking sector talking about, having specific products that are directed at women on the continent?
Yeah, there are two ways of directing a focus to women. One example would be that if you are looking at micro enterprises and the services, financial services provided to micro enterprises, you will probably hit 60 to 70% of the time the women clients with this, because they are most active in the micro enterprise side with trading and with providing services like hair services, etc. So I think what is important is that you actually target those level of businesses where there are a lot of women active in executing those businesses. Absa has an example of a micro-enterprise finance unit that has over 60% of its clients as women because it exactly targets those businesses. We often also look at the spread of transactional and savings products, and there it's more evenly spread, but as soon as you go for areas where poor women are highly active, as in the micro-enterprise side, then the targeting is because of the activity.